I used to believe my basic work files were the most boring things on earth, consisting of nothing but timelines and dry notes. That changed the moment my mother unlocked my door with a spare key, and my brother chuckled that they were just spreadsheets. 3 minutes later, the street outside was swarming with unmarked black SUVs. That was when I realized some mistakes cannot be fixed with an apology because they can actually get people killed. My name is Paige Jackson, and for the last 7 years, I have existed in two distinct realities. In one reality, I am a 34-year-old senior threat analyst for the Sentinel Risk Intelligence Office, a federal agency that technically does not exist on public maps but consumes 60 hours of my week. In that world, I hold a clearance level that requires me to sign non-disclosure agreements that are thicker than the Bible, and my daily decisions often determine whether a port authority in Seattle shuts down or a power grid in Texas remains operational. In that life, I am respected, I am feared, I am essential. Then there is the second reality. In this one, I am just Paige, the middle child who moved to D.C. to push papers for the government and refuses to talk about it because I am apparently trying to be mysterious. This is the reality where I am currently parking my rental sedan in the driveway of a split-level house in Maple Glen, Ohio, bracing myself for a weekend of psychological warfare disguised as a birthday celebration. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a moment. The suburban quiet was deceptive. In my line of work, silence usually meant you had missed something, but here, it just meant the neighbors were watching Wheel of Fortune. I looked at the passenger seat where my laptop bag sat. It was a nondescript black messenger bag, ballistic nylon, heavy duty. Inside was a laptop that cost more than my stepfather's car and possessed biometric locks that would wipe the hard drive if anyone tried to force entry. Next to it was the physical backup, the bane of my existence, a manila folder labeled simply Basic Packet. It was bureaucratic camouflage. Standard procedure required hard copies for specific infrastructure assessments in case of digital compromise. To anyone else, it looked like boring homework. To me, it was a liability I had to babysit. I took a deep breath, grabbed the bag, and stepped out into the humid Ohio air. I had made a promise to myself on the drive over. No work, no laptop, no checking the secure server. This was my mother's 60th birthday. I would be a good daughter. I would smile. I would eat the dry roast beef. I would not correct Gordon when he started talking about geopolitics. The moment I opened the front door, the wall of sound hit me. My family did not do quiet. "She is finally here," my mother, Lorraine, announced from the kitchen. She came rushing out, wiping her hands on a floral apron. Her face flushed with the stress of hosting. She hugged me, and immediately I felt the familiar tension. She smelled like pot roast and passive aggression. She pulled back and looked me up and down, her eyes landing instantly on the black bag slung over my shoulder. "Paige, honey," she said, her smile tightening at the corners. "Please tell me you did not bring work. It is my birthday weekend. Can we not have one weekend without that secret box of yours?" "It is just for emergencies, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I promise I will not open it unless the world is ending." "You always say that," she sighed, releasing me and turning back to the kitchen. "Everything is an emergency with you. I do not know why you cannot have a normal job like your sister. Vanessa is handling a merger worth $200 million, and she still managed to leave her laptop in the car." "Hello to you too, Mom," I muttered to her back. I walked into the living room, and the cast of characters was exactly where I expected them to be. My stepfather, Gordon, was in his recliner, a beer in one hand, watching a cable news segment about border security. Gordon had worked as a security guard at a mall for 20 years, followed by a stint in logistics for a trucking company, but in his head, he was a retired operator who just never got the call. "Hey, Paige," Gordon grunted, not looking away from the screen. "You see this? They are saying the feds are using new thermal satellites. I was reading about it on a forum. Bet you guys use that stuff, right? Or are you not allowed to tell me because it is classified?" He said the word classified with a sneer, like it was a dirty joke we were both in on. I analyze supply chain threats. Gordon, I said, reciting the cover story I had perfected years ago. I mostly look at shipping manifests and weather reports. It is not that exciting. Sure, he winked, finally looking at me. Shipping manifests, that is what they tell the grunts. I know how it works. I have friends who were in the service. Everything is a cover. I forced a smile and kept walking. This was the dance. If I denied it, I was hiding something. If I agreed, I was arrogant. The safest path was to be boring. I needed to be so boring that they forgot I was there. My younger brother, Derek, was on the floor playing with his new golden retriever, while his wife sat on the sofa scrolling through Instagram. Derek looked up, grinning. He was the baby of the family, 31 years old, charming, and the owner of a boutique advertising agency that had gone viral twice last year for a hot sauce commercial. There she is, Derek shouted. The woman of mystery. Did you have to scan your retina to get into the driveway? Ha ha, I said, dropping my bag near the stairs. Good to see you too. Derek? Seriously, P, he said, standing up and dusting dog hair off his designer jeans. We were betting on whether you would show up. Nessie said you would cancel last minute because of a red code or whatever. I am here, aren't I? Yeah, but for how long? He gestured to the bag. I see the nuclear football is present, for a job that involves staring at spreadsheets. You sure act like you are carrying the launch codes. It is just policy. Derek, I said, feeling the first prickle of irritation. Government property, I have to keep it secure. It is Adele, Paige, he laughed. It is not the Ark of the Covenant. I bit the inside of my cheek. They did not know. They could not know. They did not know that the laptop contained a real-time vulnerability assessment of the Eastern Seaboard's railway signaling system. They did not know that policy was the only reason I could sleep at night, knowing that my data was air-gapped from the chaos of the public internet. To them, I was just being difficult. I was the drama queen who invented rules to feel important. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. We sat around the large oak table, the one my mother polished with obsessive care. The pot roast was, as predicted, dry. The wine was cheap, but I drank it like water. Vanessa, my older sister, held court at the head of the table. Vanessa was a corporate lawyer in Columbus. She made 3 times my salary, wore suits that cost more than my first car, and had a voice that could cut glass. She was talking about a hostile takeover she was orchestrating, using terms like leveraged buyout and fiduciary duty with the confidence of someone who expected everyone to listen. So we walk into the boardroom, Vanessa was saying, gesturing with her fork. And the opposing counsel looks like he's about to cry. He knows we have them on the environmental compliance clause. It was brutal. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Gordon laughed loudly. That is my girl. A shark. You have to be a shark in this world. It is exhausting. Though, Vanessa sighed, theatrically wiping the corner of her mouth. I have been working 80-hour weeks, but the bonus structure this year is insane. We are talking about a trip to the Maldives in December. She turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. What about you? Paige? Any big wins at what is it called again? The Risk Office? Sentinel Risk Intelligence, I corrected gently. And it has been busy. Just standard end-of-year reporting. Right, Vanessa said, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. Reporting, God, I do not know how you do it. Just data entry all day. I would lose my mind if I did not have the thrill of the negotiation. Do you even talk to people, or is it just you and the machine? I talk to people, I said, taking a long sip of wine. I coordinate with different departments. Coordinate, Gordon chimed in, pointing a breadstick at me. That is government speak for meetings about meetings. I read an article that said 40% of federal employees do literally nothing. They just clock in and clock out. Not saying that is you, Paige, but the waste is incredible. I earn my paycheck. Gordon, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I am sure you do, Lorraine interrupted, sensing the temperature drop. Paige works very hard, even if she cannot tell us what she does. She looked at me with those wide, wounded eyes. Although I still do not understand why it has to be such a secret, I gave birth to you. Paige, I changed your diapers. I think I have a right to know what you do every day. I gripped my fork. It is not about you, Mom. It is federal law. If I tell you specific details, I lose my clearance. If I lose my clearance, I lose my job, and possibly go to prison. The table went silent for a second, and then Derek snorted. Prison, Derek chuckled, shaking his head. Come on, Paige. You analyze threats. You are not a spy. You are basically a glorified actuary. Who is going to arrest you for talking about paperwork? It is not just paperwork, I said, feeling the heat rise in my neck. Then what is it? Vanessa challenged, leaning forward. Give us one example. One real thing you did this year that matters. Without breaking your precious law. I looked at them. I looked at their smug, comfortable faces. I thought about 3 months ago, when a domestic terror cell tried to inject malware into the water filtration systems of 3 major cities. I thought about the 72 hours I spent awake, analyzing code fragments, tracing the IP addresses back to a server farm in Eastern Europe, and coordinating with field teams to shut down the breach 7 minutes before the payload executed. I thought about the thousands of people who drank tap water the next morning, completely unaware that they had almost been poisoned. I helped prevent a service outage, I said lamely. In the logistics sector, Vanessa threw her head back and laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. A service outage? Oh my God. Paige, you saved Amazon from delivering packages late? That is your big secret? It is important, I insisted, but I sounded weak even to myself. You know what I think? Vanessa said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I think you like the secrecy because it makes the job sound better than it is. I think you are embarrassed that you are just a mid-level bureaucrat. So you act like you are in the CIA to make us shut up. It is a defense mechanism. It is not a defense mechanism, I said. It sounds like one, Derek agreed. Like that basic packet thing in your bag. Why call it a packet? Why not just say files? You use all this jargon to build a wall. The wall exists for a reason, I said tightly. To keep us out? Lorraine asked, her voice trembling slightly. We are your family, Paige. We are not the enemy. Why do you treat us like we are going to hurt you? I am not treating you like enemies. I am treating you like civilians, I snapped. Civilians? Gordon slapped the table, making the silverware jump. Listen to her. Civilians. I was protecting assets when you were in kindergarten. Young lady, do not talk down to me. I am not talking down to you, I said, standing up. I am tired. I drove 6 hours to get here. I am going to put my bag in my room and wash up. Go ahead. Vanessa waved a hand dismissively. Go guard your secrets. We will be here in the real world. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the dining room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear them as I climbed the stairs. She is so uptight, Derek said. She has always been like that. Lorraine lamented. So distant. It is the government mindset, Gordon declared. They brainwash them, make them paranoid. I reached my old bedroom, the guest room now, and shut the door. I locked it. I leaned against the wood and closed my eyes. They did not understand. They chose not to understand. To them, safety was a given. It was air. It was gravity. They did not see the scaffolding holding it all up, and they certainly did not respect the people who maintained that scaffolding. I walked over to the desk and set the black bag down. I opened it and took out the biometric locked laptop and the thick manila envelope labeled Basic Packet. The packet contained the logistics timelines for a transport of hazardous materials moving through the Midwest corridor on Monday. It was low-tech, purely analog, intended for a briefing with a local agency that did not have secure terminals. It looked like boring lists of dates and route numbers, but in the wrong hands, it was a map of how to cause a catastrophe. I placed the packet inside a portable travel safe I brought with me, a heavy steel box that fit in my suitcase. I locked the box, then I checked the laptop. The status light was blinking steady green. Secure, I was safe. The data was safe. I just had to survive 48 hours of birthday cake and condescension. I changed into sweatpants, washing the travel grime off my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. The lines around my eyes were getting deeper. Vanessa was right about one thing. The job was aging me. But she was wrong about why. It was not the boredom, it was the weight. I was about to turn off the light and lie down when my personal phone buzzed on the nightstand. Not the work phone. That was turned off and locked in the safe. But my personal cell. I picked it up. A text message. It was from a number that was not in my contacts. But I knew who it was. It was my direct supervisor. Director Holloway. He never texted personal numbers. Never. Unless the secure channels were down. Or unless the situation was moving faster than the official protocols could track. The message was 5 words. Sunrise briefing. Urgent. Be ready. My stomach dropped. The peace I had promised myself evaporated instantly. Sunrise briefing was code. It meant an active threat was developing. Something that required immediate attention regardless of location or leave status. I looked at the locked travel safe on the desk. I looked at the door leading to the hallway, where I could hear my family laughing at some story Gordon was telling. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that my quiet weekend was over. I had to work, and I had to do it in a house full of people who thought my job was a joke. People who had zero respect for boundaries. People who saw a locked door as a personal insult. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the basic packet. Just spreadsheets, I whispered to myself. Mimicking Derek's voice. Just boring spreadsheets. If only they knew. If only they knew that the boring spreadsheets were the only reason they were sitting downstairs laughing instead of evacuating. I lay back on the pillows, but I did not sleep. I listened to the house settle. I listened to the murmurs of my family downstairs, united in their shared opinion of me as the paranoid, lying, unsuccessful sister. I let them have their fun. Tomorrow, I would have to become the person they did not believe existed. I just hoped I could keep the two worlds from colliding, because if they collided, if the walls I built came down, I knew exactly who would get hurt, and it wouldn't be the terrorists, it would be us. At 6 a.m. on Saturday, the phone did not ring. My work phone does not ring. It pulses. It is a haptic thud that feels like a heavy coin dropped into the pocket of my soul. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar creaks of my mother's house. When the vibration against the nightstand confirmed what I had dreaded since the text message the night before, I slid out of bed and picked up the device. The screen was black, save for a single authentication prompt. I pressed my thumb against the glass. The voice on the other end was Director Holloway, and he did not waste time with pleasantries. "There is a signal ghost on the Mid-Atlantic rail line," he said. His voice was gravel and coffee. "Sensors are picking up a freight load that does not exist on the manifest. We need a manual cross-reference of the physical logistics versus the digital pings. You have 4 hours before the window closes." 4 hours. I looked at the digital clock on the bedside table. That meant I had to have a preliminary assessment filed by 10 in the morning. The house was still quiet. The heavy sleepers of the Jackson family were likely dreaming of quarterly returns and ad campaigns. This was my only advantage. I moved with the muscle memory of a field agent. Though my battlefield was a laminate desk and a guest bedroom decorated with doilies, I set up my workspace with clinical precision. First, the laptop. It was a heavy, reinforced machine that looked like a brick. I connected the secure token, a small black fob that generated a new 6-digit code every 30 seconds. Then came the biometric handshake, a scan of my iris, a scan of my fingerprint. The screen flared to life, not with a colorful Windows background, but with a stark, gray terminal interface. Then, I reached into my bag for the analog backup. This was the item my brother had mocked, the basic packet. In the intelligence community, we have a rule. If you cannot trust the screen, trust the paper. When hackers loop camera feeds or spoof GPS signals, the only truth left is the physical schedule printed on watermarked government stationery before the system went online. I pulled the folder out. It was a dull, beige color, stamped with a code that looked like a library catalog number. To the untrained eye, it contained nothing but columns of times, train identification numbers, and cargo weights. It looked like the most boring homework assignment in history. But to me, it was the master key. This packet contained the true movement of hazardous materials for the entire eastern sector for the next 48 hours. If the digital sensors said a train was in Baltimore, but this paper said it should be in D.C., we had a problem. If someone knew how to read these columns, they could predict exactly when and where a payload of industrial chlorine would be passing through a densely populated suburb. I laid the papers out on the desk, weighing down the corners with a stapler and a coffee mug I had brought up the night before. I took a deep breath. I was not Paige the daughter anymore. I was Analyst Jackson. Clearance level 5. I needed water. My throat was dry, and the adrenaline was starting to taste metallic. I unlocked the bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. The house was waking up. I could smell bacon grease and hear the low hum of the television from downstairs. I went down the stairs, moving quietly. My mother was already in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. She looked up, beaming, holding a spatula like a scepter. "Good morning, birthday girl," she chirped, though it was her birthday, not mine. "You are up early? I thought you would sleep in. I have to do a little work." "Mom," I said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "Just a few hours." Her face fell. The smile dropped by 20%. "Paige, you promised." "I know. Something came up. It is urgent. Everything is urgent with you," she muttered, turning back to the stove. "Well, breakfast is in 20 minutes. Do not let your secret mission starve you." I paused at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the cold water bottle. "Mom, listen to me. This is important. I am going to be in the guest room. The door will be closed. Please, do not come in. Do not let Derek or Gordon come in. I cannot have interruptions." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. Okay. Secret agent, do not worry. I am not going to come in and defuse a bomb." I bit my tongue. I wanted to tell her that defusing a bomb would actually be simpler than what I was doing, but I knew it would just sound like hyperbole to her. I walked back up the stairs, the sound of her humming following me like a taunt. Back in the room, I engaged the deadbolt. It was a flimsy privacy lock, the kind you could pop with a credit card, but it was the only barrier I had. I sat down and dove into the data. For the next 2 hours, the world shrank to the size of my monitor. I was hunting a ghost. I compared the timestamp on the paper. Train number 409, departure 0500 hours, with the digital echo on my screen. The screen showed the train idling in a yard in Philadelphia. The paper said it should be moving at 60 miles per hour past Wilmington. Discrepancy 1, I typed furiously, logging the anomaly. My brain was operating in binary, stripping away the emotion, looking only for the pattern. Was it a sensor glitch? A weather delay? Or was someone spoofing the signal to hide the train's true location? From downstairs, the noise began to rise. It started as a murmur and grew into a roar. Derek had arrived with his wife. I heard his booming laugh, the kind he practiced for client dinners. "I am telling you, Gordon, the engagement metrics are insane." I heard Derek shout through the floorboards. "We hit 2 million views in 6 hours. It is all about the hook. You have to grab them in the first 3 seconds." I gritted my teeth, trying to focus on a line of code that suggested a bypass in the signaling system. Then I heard Gordon's voice, lower but carrying that distinct tone of know-it-all authority. "Well, in my day, we did not worry about views. We worried about physical perimeters. When I was guarding the loading docks at the mall, I could spot a thief by the way they walked. It is instinct. You cannot teach that. That is what Paige does not get. She relies too much on those computers. Real security is eyes on the target. I typed harder, my fingers hitting the keys with unnecessary force. Real security. I thought bitterly. Real security is knowing that the train Gordon thinks is just carrying lumber is actually carrying enough pressurized gas to level a city block. Real security is sitting in a room while your family mocks you, ensuring that they stay alive long enough to eat their birthday cake. The resentment was a distraction I could not afford. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, focus on the data. By 9:30 in the morning, I had isolated the issue. It was not a hack. Thankfully, it looked like a calibration error in a legacy sensor array near the Susquehanna River. But to be 100% sure, to verify that it was incompetence and not malice, I needed to cross-reference the entire week's logistical timeline against the maintenance logs. I reached for the basic packet again. My eyes were burning. The text on the page was starting to swim. I had been staring at small numbers for 3 hours straight without a break. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache behind my eyes. I needed air, just for a moment. My brain felt like a sponge that had been squeezed dry. If I kept staring, I would make a mistake. A decimal point in the wrong place could change a safety rating from secure to critical. I looked at the clock. 9:40. I had 20 minutes before the hard deadline, but the bulk of the work was done. I just needed to do the final verification. A quick 5-minute walk to the end of the block and back would clear the fog. It would reset my eyes. I stood up and stretched, my spine cracking. I looked at the desk. The laptop was open, the screen glowing with the map of the rail network. I hit the command to lock the workstation. The screen went black, replaced by the password prompt. Secure. No one could get into that machine without my fingerprint and a code that changed every 30 seconds. Then I looked at the basic packet. The manila folder was lying open on the desk, the spreadsheets spread out like a fan. I hesitated. Protocol stated that all physical classified materials must be returned to the travel safe when not in direct use. The heavy steel box was sitting on the floor by the bed, open and waiting. But I was only going for a walk, just down the street and back. The door was locked. My mother was cooking. Derek was watching football highlights. Gordon was probably napping. I'm just going for 30 minutes. I told myself, it takes 5 minutes to pack everything up and another 5 to set it back up. That cuts into my deadline. It was a calculation, a risk assessment, and in that moment, tired, annoyed, and desperate for fresh air, I made the wrong call. It is just spreadsheets. I thought, echoing my brother's voice. To them, it is just boring lists. Even if they came in, they would not know what they were looking at. It does not look like a spy novel. It looks like accounting. I left the papers on the desk. I did not put them in the safe. I did not even close the folder. I just grabbed my room key, walked out, and locked the door behind me. As I walked down the stairs, the smell of burnt sugar filled the air. My mother was wrestling with a caramel sauce. Going somewhere? She asked. Not looking up. Just a walk. Mom, to clear my head. Back in 30 minutes. Take your time, Derek called out from the living room. Maybe you will find a personality out there. I ignored him and stepped out the front door. The morning air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the house. I walked fast, my sneakers slapping against the pavement. I let myself feel the wind. I let myself forget about signal ghosts and sensor arrays. I walked to the park at the end of the street, watched a squirrel run up an oak tree, and breathed. For 20 minutes, I was just a person in a neighborhood. I turned back when my watch hit the 25-minute mark. I felt better, sharper. I was ready to finish the report, send it to Holloway, and then endure the rest of the party. The doorknob did not turn. It drifted. That is the only way I can describe it. I had reached for the brass handle of the guest room door, expecting the resistance of the cheap privacy lock I had engaged 30 minutes ago. Instead, the wood groaned, and the door swung inward with a sickening, weightless ease. I stood in the hallway, my hand still suspended in the air, staring at the strike plate. It wasn't shattered, but the wood around the latch was chewed up, splintered raw, where someone had applied just enough pressure to pop the mechanism. It wasn't a break-in, it was a bypass. It was the kind of lazy, brute force entry you use when you don't respect the person on the other side of the door. My eyes snapped to the desk. The laptop was there, a black monolith, still sleeping its secure sleep. The biometric light pulsed green, mocking me with its safety. But the space next to it, the space where I had left the manila folder labeled Basic Packet, was empty. I looked at the floor. The heavy steel travel safe was still there. Lid open, gaping like a hungry mouth. I had left it that way because I was only going to be gone for 30 minutes. I was only going to walk to the park and back. I had calculated the risk based on the assumption that my family, while annoying, were decent people who understood the concept of a closed door. I was wrong. I had applied a logic filter to an emotional data set. My stomach didn't drop. It vanished. The sensation was a physical hollow, a cold vacuum opening up beneath my ribs. I stepped into the room, checking the corners, checking under the bed, hoping for a hallucination. Maybe I had put them away. Maybe I had sleepwalked. Then I heard it. It drifted up through the floorboards, the sound of paper being shuffled, the crisp, dry crinkle of high-grade government bond paper. It is literally just a spreadsheet. Lorraine, look at the columns. Gordon's voice, smug, dismissive. I know, but why lock it up? My mother's voice, curious, but light, like she was solving a crossword puzzle. Drama, Gordon replied. She wants us to think she is hunting Russians. Let me see. This is just a shipping schedule for chemicals. Boring stuff. I turned around and walked out of the room. I didn't run. Running is for when you can still stop the disaster. I walked with the heavy leaden steps of someone walking toward a funeral. I came back to the house expecting noise, TV, laughter, the clatter of dishes. Instead, it was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your skin notice itself. I called out once, no answer. My feet took the stairs before my brain finished the thought. Halfway up, I heard paper. Quick, dry shuffles. Not a magazine, not junk mail. Paper that mattered. At the top landing. My door looked closed, but the latch wasn't seated. I reached for the knob, already knowing what I was about to find. As I descended the stairs, the scene in the living room came into view like a slow-motion car crash. They were gathered around the coffee table. My mother had pushed aside a vase of fake hydrangeas to make room. Gordon was leaning back in his recliner, holding page 4, the structural integrity analysis of the rail bridge over the Potomac, in one hand, a half-eaten cookie in the other. Derek was standing over the table, his smartphone held high. The camera lens pointed down at the spread, but the detail that made my vision blur was on the table itself. My mother had placed a mug of hot tea directly on top of page 1. There was a condensation ring forming on the header, right over the classification stamp. I stood at the bottom of the stairs. My hands were cold, not cool, ice cold. The blood had left my extremities to protect my vital organs. Derek, phone, down, now. My voice was not loud. It was barely a whisper, but in the acoustic trap of the living room, it landed like a stone. They all froze. Gordon looked up, cookie midway to his mouth. Derek lowered his phone slightly. Lorraine turned, a guilty smile plastering itself onto her face. "Oh, you are back," she chirped, though the pitch was too high. "We were just tidying up. The door was open." "The door was locked," I said. Walking toward them, I didn't blink. I couldn't blink. "You broke the latch." "Broke is a strong word," Gordon scoffed, tossing page 4 onto the table as if it were a sports magazine. It was stuck. I gave it a nudge. "We were worried about you leaving the window open or something." "Put the papers down," I repeated. I was standing over the coffee table now. I could see the tea stains soaking into the fiber of the document. "Do not touch them again," Lorraine huffed, crossing her arms. "Paige, honestly, you are acting like we found a dead body. It is numbers. It is train times. I looked at it. It is nothing." It is boring as hell. Actually, Derek laughed, stepping back and swiping on his phone screen. I do not know why you guard this stuff. Departure time, 0600. Wow. Exhilarating. What is it? Pool cleaning supplies? It is hazardous material transport logistics, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. It was a pure, white-hot frequency. It is the route for 90 tons of pressurized chlorine gas moving through a residential zone. And you just put a T-stain on the protocol for emergency containment. Gordon rolled his eyes. Chlorine, like for pools. Exactly what I said. You federal types always use big words for simple things. It is not for pools. Gordon, it is industrial. If that train derails, 6,000 people die in 4 minutes. That piece of paper you are crinkling, that tells the response teams which way the wind blows. For a second, silence hung in the room. Gordon looked at the paper, then back at me, his ego wrestling with the information. Well, he grunted, if it is that dangerous, you shouldn't leave it lying around. I left it in a locked room, I snapped. A room in my house, Lorraine interjected, her voice sharp. And do not speak to Gordon that way. We are just trying to understand what you do. You are so secretive. It makes us worry. Honestly, we thought maybe you were in trouble, or that you were lying about the job. So you broke in to audit me? We just wanted to see. Lorraine threw her hands up. And look, it is just boring work stuff. Now we know. No need to have a heart attack. I looked at Derek. He was still tapping on his phone, ignoring the tension, smiling at his screen. Anyway, Derek said, problem solved. I did you a favor. He turned the screen toward me. I know you are messy with paper. You always lose things. So I digitized it for you. Scanned the whole packet, crisp PDF, searchable text. I can email it to you, or... I stared at his phone. He was using a free scanning app. One of those popular ones with the bright blue interface. I knew the app. I knew the developer. I knew the terms of service because my agency had banned it 3 years ago. Derek, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying calm. What is that icon in the top right corner? He looked. What? The cloud? Yeah. It syncs to my drive and the app's backup server. That way I do not lose it if my phone dies. Smart, right? The world stopped. It didn't slow down. It ceased to rotate. Syncs to the app's backup server. That server was not in Ohio. It was not in the United States. It was a third-party lease in a jurisdiction that sold metadata to the highest bidder. The timeline, the route, the structural weaknesses of the bridges, the lack of sensor coverage in Sector 4, all of it. It wasn't just snooping anymore. It wasn't just my mother being nosy. It was dissemination. It was an uncontrolled leak of Category 1 infrastructure data to a public cloud environment. Delete it, I whispered. I will. Jesus, Derek said, rolling his eyes at my tone. I will send it to you first. Then I will delete it from my phone. No, I screamed, the sound tearing out of my throat so loud that Lorraine jumped. Do not send it. Do not touch the screen. Do not do anything. Derek recoiled, holding the phone to his chest. Whoa. Psycho much? Chill out. Paige, you do not understand, I said, breathless. It is already uploading. I can see the progress bar. Derek, that app. It sends copies to a server. You just broadcast the vulnerabilities of the Mid-Atlantic rail network to the internet. Oh my God. Vanessa, who had been quiet in the corner, finally spoke up. She stood up, looking at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. Paige, stop. You are sounding paranoid. Nobody cares about your train schedules. Broadcast to the internet? You sound like a conspiracy theorist. She is manic, Gordon muttered, shaking his head. I told you, the stress gets to them. They were laughing. They were actually smiling at me. They thought I was performing. They thought this was the frantic, quirky sister having a meltdown over office supplies. I looked at the coffee table, the tea ring on the paper. I looked at Derek's phone. The blue cloud icon turned green. Upload complete. It was done. The data was out. I couldn't yell anymore. I couldn't explain. There were no words in the English language that could bridge the gap between their reality and mine. In their reality, they were looking at spreadsheets. In mine, they had just painted a target on the ground and handed the coordinates to every bad actor with a Wi-Fi connection. I reached into my pocket. My hand closed around my personal cell phone. I didn't want to do it. I had sworn I would never do it. It was the nuclear option, the break glass in case of war button. It was designed for field agents who were compromised, for assets who were about to be captured. But I was captured. I was captured by the sheer destructive ignorance of my own bloodline. "Paige?" Lorraine asked, her smile fading as she saw the look in my eyes. "What are you doing?" I pulled the phone out. I unlocked it with a thumb trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I opened the red interface. "You said you wanted to know what I do," I said softly. I looked at Gordon. "You think you know security?" I looked at Derek. "You think the cloud is safe?" I looked at my mother. "You wanted to be involved?" "Paige, put the phone away," Vanessa warned. Stepping forward, "You are scaring Mom." "I am not the one you should be scared of," I said. My thumb hovered over the command. Initiate containment protocol, level 1. It wasn't just a call to the police. It wasn't 911. It was a signal to the Department of Homeland Security's nearest rapid response team that a federal asset had been compromised and sensitive intelligence was actively leaking. "Paige," Derek yelled. Stepping toward me, I pressed the button. The screen flashed red once, then went black. A single haptic pulse confirmed the signal was received. I lowered the phone and sat down on the ottoman. I felt strangely light. The panic was gone, replaced by a terrible, hollow certainty. "What did you do?" Lorraine whispered. "I called work," I said, staring at the tea stain on the paper. "Good," Gordon huffed, picking up his cookie again. "Maybe they can tell you to calm down." I looked at my watch. "You have about 3 minutes," I said. "Maybe 4, if traffic is bad." "For what?" Derek asked, looking at his phone again. "For the rest of your life to end," I said, and then I waited. I didn't move to take the papers. I didn't try to stop Derek from checking his Instagram. I just sat there, listening to the clock on the mantelpiece tick, counting down the seconds until the world outside crashed through the front door. The room did not explode. There were no sirens. Not yet. There was only a vacuum. A sudden, terrifying absence of noise where the laughter used to be. I sat on the ottoman, my hands folded in my lap, breathing in a 4-count rhythm. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. It was the only thing keeping me from vomiting. "Phones," I said. My voice was flat, stripped of any familial warmth. It was the voice I used during site containment drills. "Everyone, put your phones on the coffee table. Now." Gordon blinked, his face flushing a deep, angry red. He looked at the device in my hand, then at the scattered papers, and finally at me. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the predictable indignation of a man who believes he is the king of his castle. "Now you listen here, young lady," Gordon spat, leaning forward in his recliner. "I do not care what kind of tantrum you are throwing. You do not give orders in my house. You want phones? Come and take them." "Gordon, please," I said, and I did not look at him. I looked at the front door. "This is not a debate. In less than 3 minutes, this house is going to be occupied by a federal tactical team. If you are holding a device that is transmitting data, they will treat you as a hostile combatant. Put the phone on the table." "You called the police?" he roared, standing up. The veins in his neck bulged. "On your own parents? You actually called the cops because we looked at your homework?" "I did not call the police," I corrected him, my eyes shifting to the window. "Police read you your rights. Police knock on the door. I activated a code black containment protocol. These people do not care about your rights. Gordon, they care about the integrity of the national grid. They are not coming to arrest you. They are coming to sanitize a leak." "Derek, standing by the window, suddenly looked very pale. The arrogance that had fueled his little scanning stunt was draining out of him, replaced by the twitchy panic of a child who realizes he has broken something expensive. He looked down at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. I will just delete it, Derek stammered. I will delete the scan. And the app. I will wipe the phone. Then there is no proof, right? No harm, no foul. Do not touch that screen, I barked. The command was so loud, so sharp, that Derek actually flinched and nearly dropped the device. If you delete that file, I said, speaking rapidly, trying to fit the explanation into the shrinking window of time we had left. You are altering digital evidence during an active federal investigation. That changes the charge from gross negligence to obstruction of justice. The metadata is already on the server. Derek, they know you have it. If you delete it now, it looks like you're trying to hide a crime. Put the phone down. Face down. Do not lock it. Derek's hands were shaking. He looked at the phone as if it were a live grenade. Slowly, agonizingly, he placed it on the coffee table next to the tea-stained hazardous material manifest. Lorraine began to weep. It started as a sniffle and quickly devolved into full-blown, heaving sobs. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. I do not understand, she wailed, her voice muffled. I just wanted to know you, Paige. I just wanted to be part of your life. Why do you have to ruin everything? Why do you hate us so much? I closed my eyes for a second. Even now, with the world collapsing, she made it about her feelings. I do not hate you, Mom, I said tiredly. I tried to protect you. I locked the door. I told you not to touch it. You chose to ignore me because you thought my boundaries were a joke. You thought my job was a game. It is just paper, she screamed, looking up, her face blotchy and wet. We are family. Family shares everything. Not this, I whispered. Never this. On the coffee table. My mother's iPad began to trill. It was a cheerful, bubbly ringtone that sounded perverse in the thick tension of the room. The screen lit up with a FaceTime request. Vanessa. My sister had stormed out to her car 5 minutes before I pressed the button, unable to deal with the arguing, but she hadn't left the driveway yet. She was likely calling to scold me from the safety of her Mercedes. Do not answer it, I warned, but Lorraine, desperate for an ally, lunged for the tablet before I could stop her. She swiped the screen. Nessie? Mom cried into the camera. Nessie, you have to come back inside. Paige has gone crazy. She called the SWAT team on us. I leaned over and grabbed the iPad from my mother's hands, propping it up against the sugar bowl so Vanessa could see the room, but I did not pick it up. Vanessa, I said, staring into the pixelated face of my sister. She looked annoyed, sitting in the driver's seat of her car with her sunglasses on. What is going on? Vanessa demanded, her voice tinny through the speakers. I can hear Mom screaming from the driveway. Are you serious? Paige? Another drama? Listen to me very carefully, I said. Do not come back inside. Do not start the car. Just sit there and keep your hands on the steering wheel where they can see them. Who is they? Vanessa scoffed. You are being ridiculous. I am coming in to settle this. No, I said. You are not. And then, we heard it. It was not the sound of a siren. Sirens are warnings. They give you time to pull over. This was the sound of aggression. From the street outside, there was a collective screech of heavy-duty tires biting into asphalt. It was the sound of 3 vehicles braking simultaneously from high speed to zero. Screech thud. The house shook slightly. Derek ran to the sheer curtains and peeked through the gap. He stumbled back as if he had been slapped. Oh my God, he whispered. SUVs, black ones, no license plates. There are 3 of them on the lawn. They drove right onto the lawn. Mom! Gordon stood up, puffing his chest out, though his eyes betrayed his fear. I am going out there to talk to them. This is private property. They cannot just drive on my grass. Sit down, Gordon, I yelled, standing up for the first time. Do not move. If you walk out that door reaching for something, they will drop you." "They have guns," Derek squeaked, peeking again. "Paige, they have rifles. Why do they have rifles?" "Because you stole classified infrastructure data," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And they do not know you are just an idiot. They think you are a threat." I looked at the iPad. Vanessa's face had gone slack. She was watching from the driveway, presumably seeing the tactical stack forming up at our front door. "Paige," Vanessa whispered, "they are surrounding the house." "I know," I said. "Just watch. Vanessa, this is what I do." There was no knock. There was no police, open up. The front door simply ceased to be a barrier. There was a thunderous crash as the battering ram hit the lock. The wood splintered with a violence that made my mother scream. The door flew open, banging hard against the interior wall, and the sunlight from the outside was instantly blocked by a wall of black uniforms. "Federal agents! Hands! Show me hands!" The shout was a physical force. It filled the entryway and spilled into the living room. Gordon froze. Lorraine shrieked and curled into a ball. Derek threw his hands up so fast he nearly knocked over a lamp. I stood perfectly still, my hands raised to shoulder height, palms open, fingers spread. I did not look at my family. I looked at the lead operator entering the room. He was wearing full tactical gear, a ballistic helmet, and his face was covered. The barrel of his carbine swept the room with robotic precision. "Clear left. Clear right. Contact front." 4 agents poured into the living room in under 2 seconds. The efficiency was terrifying. They moved like water, flowing around the furniture, securing the perimeter. "Get on the ground," the lead agent roared at Gordon. "On your stomach. Now." "I am the owner of this house." Gordon tried to bluster, but 2 agents grabbed him by the shoulders and forced him down to the carpet. He hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Mom, get down!" Derek cried. Dropping to his knees, I remained standing, my hands visible. "Identify!" the lead agent shouted, his weapon trained on my chest. "Paige Jackson," I said clearly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Senior Analyst, Sentinel Risk Intelligence, Service Number Alpha 94 Zulu Tango. I am the reporting officer." The agent paused for a fraction of a second, his eyes scanning me. He saw the posture, he saw the lack of panic, he saw the badge I had clipped to my belt before I came downstairs, the one thing I had done while they were arguing. "Secure the others," the lead agent barked. "Isolate the reporting officer." One of the team members moved toward me, not roughly, but firmly. He took my arm and pulled me away from the coffee table, away from the crying mother and the terrified brother and the stepfather who was currently eating the carpet. "The devices are on the table," I told the agent, nodding toward the pile. "The source of the leak is the iPhone 14 with the cracked case. It is currently active." "Copy that," the agent said. "Bag all electronics, Faraday bags, now." I watched as a gloved hand reached out and grabbed Derek's phone, the phone that contained the PDF, the phone that had synced to the cloud, the phone that had ended my career as I knew it. My mother looked up from the floor, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked at me standing there, the only one not pinned to the ground, the only one speaking their language. "Paige," she sobbed, her voice broken. "Help us." I looked at her. I looked at the chaos in her living room, the mud from the agent's boots on her pristine rug, the shattered doorframe. "I can't," I said softly. "I told you, it is mandatory." The lead agent keyed his radio. "Target secure, site containment established, begin digital forensics sweep." And just like that, the cozy family weekend was gone. We were no longer a family. We were a crime scene. The living room of my childhood home, usually a sanctuary of floral potpourri and daytime television, had been transformed into a sterile zone of federal control. The transformation happened in less than 60 seconds. The air, once smelling of my mother's burnt sugar caramel sauce, now reeked of body armor, gun oil, and the sharp, copper tang of fear. "Stay down! Do not move your hands!" The command barked by the lead agent was not a suggestion. It was a physical wall. My mother was face down on the beige carpet, her hands clasped behind her head, sobbing into the fibers. She looked small. She looked like a confused child who had been knocked over on a playground. Except the bullies here were wearing tactical vests emblazoned with Department of Homeland Security patches. Gordon was struggling slightly, not fighting, but writhing with the indignation of a man whose authority had been stripped away. An agent had a knee pressed firmly between Gordon's shoulder blades, keeping him pinned. "I have a bad back," Gordon wheezed, his face pressed against the floor. "You cannot do this. I am a taxpayer." "Remain silent," the agent replied, his voice devoid of any sympathy. I stood near the fireplace, separated from my family by a wall of black uniforms. I was the anomaly in the room. I was standing while they were prone. I was calm while they were shattering. A tall agent with a jammer pack on his back approached me. He did not point his weapon at me, but his hand hovered near his holster. "State your authentication string," he demanded. I looked him in the eye. "Sierra. Tango, 9, 4, break, November, Echo, 7. It was a duress code, but also an identifier. It told them I was the asset, but it also told them I was the cause of the alarm. "Verify," the agent said into his headset. He waited a beat, listening to a voice I could not hear. Then he nodded. "Confirmed. Asset is secure. We are moving to containment phase." He turned to me. "Ma'am, I need you to step into the kitchen. We need to clear the primary zone for forensics. Do not speak to the subjects." The subjects. That is what they called my family now. Not civilians, not residents. Subjects. I walked past them. I walked past Derek, who was curled in a fetal position near the window, shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. I walked past my mother, who lifted her head slightly as I passed. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed, and filled with a look I had never seen directed at me before. It was not anger, it was horror. She looked at me as if I were a monster that had been wearing her daughter's skin. "Paige," she whimpered. "Keep your head down, ma'am," an agent shouted at her. I flinched, but I kept walking. I stepped into the kitchen, the agent following close behind. He pointed to one of the oak chairs around the breakfast table. "Sit," he said. I sat. The kitchen was sunny. The pancake batter was still sitting in a bowl on the counter, a silent testament to the morning that was supposed to be. A second agent entered the kitchen. He was not wearing a helmet. He was older, wearing a windbreaker with cyber response stenciled on the chest. He carried a metallic briefcase. This was the tech lead. I knew the type. These were the guys who didn't care about guns. They cared about data packets. He placed the briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside were rows of anti-static bags and a portable Faraday cage. "Agent Jackson," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "I am Agent Miller. I am the on-site digital forensics lead. We have isolated the signal from the residents. The local cell tower has been geofenced. We are scrubbing the outbound traffic now." "The upload completed," I said, my voice sounding hollow in the tiled room. I saw the green check mark. It went to the cloud server. Miller nodded grimly. "We know. We have already issued a subpoena to the cloud provider to freeze the account and wipe the instance, but we need the physical source to confirm the hash values." He looked toward the living room. "Who took the scan?" "Derek Jackson," I said. "My brother. He used an iPhone 14. It is on the coffee table. Cracked screen. Black case." "And the hard copy?" Miller asked. "On the coffee table," I replied. "Stained with tea. It is a hazardous material logistics timeline for the mid-Atlantic sector. Specific train routes, cargo manifests, vulnerability points for the Susquehanna Bridge." Miller stopped writing. He looked up at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. "The paper document," he said slowly. "Why was it on the coffee table? Agent Jackson, standard operating procedure for a Category 1 document is that it remains in a secured lockbox or on your person at all times. It is never to be left unattended in an unsecured environment. This was the question. This was the guillotine. I could have lied. I could have said they broke into the box. I could have said they physically restrained me and took it. It would have saved my career. It would have made me the victim. But I looked at the pancake batter. I looked at the sunlight hitting the floor. I left it on the desk, I said quietly. I went for a walk. I locked the door to the room. But I did not secure the document in the safe. I estimated the risk was low for a 30-minute interval. Miller stared at me for a long time. He was judging me. He was weighing my years of service against this one. Colossal lapse in judgment. You violated the clean desk protocol, Miller stated. Yes, I said. And you left classified material in a room accessible by uncleared civilians. Yes, Miller sighed, and made a note on his tablet. That is going to be a problem for you. Paige? I know, I said. But the access was forced. The door was breached. They bypassed the lock. And the dissemination. The scanning. That was a deliberate act by Derek Jackson, despite my verbal warnings to stop. We will determine intent, Miller said. Right now, we need to secure the hardware. He motioned to the door. 2 agents walked in carrying plastic bags. One of them held my laptop. The other held a collection of phones. My mother's, Gordon's, Derek's, and Vanessa's iPad. We are seizing all electronic devices in the residence, Miller said. Chain of custody starts now. He reached out his hand. Your phone too, Agent Jackson. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was my lifeline. It was the device I had used to call them. To avoid any appearance of bias, Miller said softly, you are a witness, but you are also a subject of the security inquiry. We need to verify that you did not facilitate the transfer. I unlocked my phone and handed it to him. He dropped it into a silver Faraday bag and sealed the Velcro strip. The sound was like a zipper closing on a body bag. Okay, Miller said. Let's process the scene. We walked back into the living room. The agents were allowing my family to sit up now, but they were still under guard. Gordon was sitting on the sofa, rubbing his shoulder, his face a mask of purple rage. This is unbelievable, Gordon spat as he saw me. You let them take our phones? Paige, I have business contacts on that phone. I have deals in progress. You cannot just take my property. Sir, your property was used to commit a potential felony, Miller interrupted, stepping between me and Gordon. The device is evidence. It will be returned if and when it is cleared by the forensics lab. That could take 6 months. It could take 2 years. 2 years, Gordon shouted. Do you know who I am? I am her father. I raised her. Miller looked at Gordon with an expression of mild boredom. Biological relation does not grant security clearance. Sir, and frankly, considering the nature of the data your stepdaughter works with, you should be thanking us that we are only taking your phone and not taking you to a black site for debriefing. Gordon shut his mouth with an audible click. The reality of the situation was finally piercing his ego. At that moment, the front door, which was hanging off one hinge, was pushed open further. A woman stood in the doorway, framed by the flashing lights of the tactical vehicles outside. It was Vanessa. She was wearing her designer sunglasses and a cashmere coat, looking like she had just stepped out of a boardroom, except her face was pale and her mouth was hanging open. She had evidently parked her car and walked up the driveway, likely stopped by the perimeter team, and then escorted to the door when she identified herself as family. She looked at the agents. She looked at Mom crying on the sofa. She looked at Derek, who was staring at the floor, looking broken. Then she looked at me. Paige, she said, her voice trembling. What is this? It is containment, Vanessa, I said. There are men with machine guns on the lawn. Vanessa stammered. The neighbors are watching. Mrs. Higgins is filming from her porch. You have destroyed us. Do you realize that? You have made us into a spectacle. I did not do this, I said, pointing to the coffee table where the tea-stained paper still lay. They did. They wanted to see the secret. Now everyone sees it. Vanessa shook her head. You are crazy. You are actually mentally ill. You could have stopped this. You could have just… I do not know. Grabbed the paperback? Laughed it off? I could not, I said. That is what you do not get. Nessie, there is no laughing it off when you compromise national security. There is only this… Miller cleared his throat. Ma'am, are you Vanessa Jackson? Yes, she snapped. I need your phone, Miller said, extending his hand, and any other electronic devices you have on your person. You are joking, Vanessa scoffed. I am a lawyer. I have attorney-client privilege on this device. You cannot just take it. I can, and I am, Miller said calmly. Exigent circumstances involving a Class 1 data breach. If you resist, I will have you detained for obstruction. Give me the phone. Vanessa looked at him, then at the agents behind him. She saw the absolute lack of hesitation in their eyes. She reached into her purse, pulled out her sleek, expensive smartphone, and slapped it into Miller's hand. I am suing you, she hissed. I am suing this entire agency. Get in line, Miller muttered, dropping her phone into a bag. He turned to the team. All right, we are moving the subjects for interview. Separate transport, mother and stepfather in Vehicle 1, brother in Vehicle 2, sister stays here for statement, then releases. Moving them? I asked, feeling a spike of panic. Where are you taking them? Field office in Columbus, Miller said. Standard interview. We need sworn statements regarding the access. We need to verify they didn't send copies to anyone else before the upload. 2 agents moved toward Lorraine and Gordon. Please, stand up, the agent said to my mother. Lorraine stood up shakily. She looked frail. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, crushing shame. She looked around her living room, at the mud on the carpet, the broken door, the sheer violence of the intrusion into her safe suburban life. Then she looked at me. I wanted her to yell. I wanted her to scream at me again, but she didn't. She walked past me, flanked by the agents. She stopped for just a second. Her eyes were dry now. They were hard. They were the eyes of a woman who had decided that the person standing in front of her was no longer her child. You will regret this, she said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. It was delivered with the same certainty as a weather forecast. Mom, I started, reaching out a hand. She flinched away from my touch as if I were radioactive. Do not call me that. A daughter protects her family. You are just a government snitch. She walked out the door, into the bright, harsh sunlight of the driveway. I watched as they led her to one of the black SUVs. I watched Gordon stumbling behind her, looking old and defeated. I watched Derek being led out in handcuffs, not because he was being arrested, Miller had said, but for his own safety and secure transport. He looked back at me one last time. He didn't say anything. He just looked confused, like he still couldn't understand how a scanner app had led to this. I stood alone in the living room with Agent Miller and Vanessa. The house was silent again, save for the static of the radios. I looked at the coffee table. The basic packet was still there. The tea stain had dried, leaving a brown ring over the header that read Top Secret /No Critical Infrastructure. Was it worth it? Vanessa asked from the doorway. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the empty space where our parents had just been standing. I looked at the document. I thought about the bridge over the Susquehanna. I thought about the thousands of commuters who crossed it every morning. I thought about the payload of chlorine gas. Yes, I said, though my heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 jagged pieces. Miller stepped forward and picked up the document with a pair of tweezers. He placed it into an evidence bag. We are done here, Miller said. Let's go. I walked out of the house, leaving the broken door swinging in the wind. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never step foot in this house again. The machine of the law had started to turn, and it would grind everything, my relationships, my history, my name, into dust before it was finished. But the train would be safe, the bridge would stand, and that, I told myself as I climbed into the back of the third SUV. Had to be enough. The aftermath of a federal raid does not look like it does in the movies. In cinema, there is a fade to black, and then a scene in a courtroom. In reality, there is a vacuum. There is a silence that rings louder than a gunshot, followed immediately by the noise of people scrambling to save their own skins. For 72 hours following the incident at my mother's house, I sat in a limbo that felt like purgatory. I was back in D.C. physically, but mentally, I was still standing in that living room watching my mother cry. The difference was that now, the narrative was no longer in my control. My sister, Vanessa, wasted no time. She did not wait for the dust to settle. She did not wait for the legal charges to be filed. She went on the offensive immediately. By Tuesday morning, the family version of events had been constructed, polished, and distributed to every aunt, cousin, and family friend in the tri-state area. According to Vanessa, I had suffered a mental health episode induced by career stress. In her retelling, there was no breach of national security. There was just an overzealous, power-hungry sister who used her government connections to punish her family for a minor disagreement. Paige has always been dramatic, Vanessa told our cousin Mark, a conversation I learned about later. She chose her career over her own blood. She called a SWAT team because Mom spilled some tea. It is sick, really. We are looking into getting her help. It was a brilliant strategy. It turned the aggressors into victims and the whistleblower into a pariah. By the time I walked into the Sentinel Risk Intelligence office on Wednesday, half my hometown believed I had swatted my own parents for fun, but the opinion of Maple Glen, Ohio, was the least of my problems. I was summoned to the Office of Internal Review at 8 a.m. The room was cold, windowless, and smelled of lemon furniture polish. Director Holloway sat at the head of the table. Next to him was a representative from legal and a union rep I had not asked for but was apparently entitled to. "Sit down, Jackson," Holloway said. He did not offer me coffee. I sat. "We have reviewed the preliminary incident report from the weekend," Holloway began, sliding a thick file across the table. "The good news is that the containment team acted fast. The data has been scrubbed from the primary cloud server. The vendor is cooperating. We do not believe the hazardous material route has been compromised by foreign actors. Yet, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That is good. However," the legal representative cut in, her voice sharp, "that does not absolve you of the gross negligence displayed regarding the handling of physical asset 409. "I know," I said. "I violated the Clean Desk Protocol. You left a Category 1 document in an unsecured residential room," Holloway said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "And because of that, we have a situation where 3 civilians are now potential defendants in a federal inquiry. Do you know what a nightmare that is for us? Paige, we are not in the business of prosecuting grandmothers." "My mother is 60, I said automatically. "She is not a grandmother yet." "She is a liability," Holloway corrected. "And so are you." He leaned forward. "Effective immediately. Your remote work privileges are revoked. You are stripped of your take-home clearance. You will surrender your travel safe and your biometric laptop. For the next 90 days, you will work from the basement archive terminal. You will audit old logs. You will not touch live operations. And you will undergo a mandatory psychological evaluation to determine if you are fit to hold a clearance." It was a demotion in everything but name. I was being put in the corner. "Understood," I said. I did not fight it. I deserved it. I had let my guard down. "And Paige," Holloway added, his eyes softening just a fraction, "stay away from your family. If the investigation finds that you are coaching them, or colluding with them, or even comforting them in a way that obstructs the inquiry, you will be terminated. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." I walked out of the office feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. I still had a job, technically, but I had lost the trust that took me 7 years to build. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, the Jackson family was not sitting idly by. Vanessa had hired a lawyer. His name was Arthur Sterling, a strip mall litigator who specialized in personal injury and DUI cases. but who billed himself as a civil rights defender, Sterling's strategy was aggressive and stupid, which made it dangerous. On Thursday, I received a notification that Sterling had filed a motion to suppress the evidence seized from the house. His argument? The document was not clearly marked. The government claims this was top secret, Sterling told a local reporter who was all too happy to cover the scandal of the federal raid on Maple Street. But my clients state that the document looked like a standard shipping invoice. Furthermore, any markings that may have existed were obscured by a spill. How can a citizen be expected to know a document is classified if the government does not label it properly? It was the tea stain. They were using the tea stain, the very evidence of their carelessness, as their shield. They were arguing that because my mother had been clumsy enough to spill Earl Grey on the classification header, they were innocent of knowing its value. It was infuriating. It was also a lie. The footer of every page was marked secret/no foreign, but Sterling knew that the jury pool in Ohio would not care about footers. They would care about the poor mother who just wanted to bond with her daughter. Then there was Derek, my brother. The accidental architect of this disaster was sticking to a story that was equal parts pathetic and plausible. "I was just scanning it to be neat," Derek told the investigators during his initial interview. "Paige is messy. I hate paper clutter. I just wanted to give her a PDF. I did not send it to anyone," the investigators pressed him. "But the app syncs to the cloud." "I did not know that," Derek insisted. "I am not a tech guy. I just pressed the button." It was an accident. It was the idiot defense, and in the American legal system, being an idiot is often a valid defense against intent. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the wall. My phone was silent because I had changed the number. But the ghost of the old ringing sound haunted me. Then, the new landline rang. I stared at it. Only 3 people had this number: Holloway, the HR department, and the emergency contact line for the investigation. I picked it up. "Hello?" "Paige." It was my mother. I froze. "How did you get this number?" "Vanessa found it," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was wet, thick with tears. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. "Paige, please, you have to stop this." "I cannot stop it. Mom, it is out of my hands. They are freezing our bank accounts. Paige," she sobbed. "Gordon cannot access his business line of credit. They took his laptop. He cannot work. We are going to lose the house if this drags on. You know Gordon leverages everything." "Maybe Gordon should not have read classified documents," I said, my voice shaking. "Do not blame him," she snapped. The sadness instantly replaced by defense. "He was just looking. Paige, listen to me. Mr. Sterling says that if you just submit a statement, if you just say that you gave us permission, that you asked Derek to scan it, if you say that, it all goes away. It becomes a workplace error, not a crime." I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "You want me to lie to the FBI?" I asked. "You want me to say I ordered Derek to upload a hazardous material route to a public server? Mom, that is a felony. I would go to prison for 10 years. "But you are the expert," she pleaded. "You know how to talk to them. You can explain it. They will listen to you. If you do not help us, they are going to ruin Derek's career. He just lost his biggest client. He is your brother, Paige. Does that mean nothing to you?" "It means everything," I said. "That is why I tried to stop him." "If you loved me," she whispered, playing the final card, the one she had kept up her sleeve since I was 6 years old. "You would fix this. You would take the fall for your family. That is what family does." I hung up. I pulled the cord out of the wall. I sat on the floor and cried for 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, drank a glass of cold water, and went to bed. I did not sleep. The next morning, Friday, the situation shifted from a family drama to something much darker. I was at my new desk in the basement archive, manually sorting through old threat logs. When Agent Miller walked in, he looked tired. He was wearing the same windbreaker he had worn at the raid. "Jackson," he said, "walk with me." We walked out to the secure courtyard. It was raining. The gray sky matched my mood perfectly. "We finished the forensic image of Derek's phone," Miller said, lighting a cigarette. "And the cloud account." "And?" I asked. "Did he send it to anyone?" "Derek?" "No," Miller said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Derek is telling the truth. Mostly. He is an idiot. He scanned it, the app synced it, and he forgot about it. He did not email it. He did not text it." "So it was just the cloud sync," I said, feeling a small wave of relief. "That is bad, but it is negligent, not malicious." "Hold on," Miller said. "I said Derek did not send it, but the app logs show a share event." I stopped walking. "What?" "The scanning app has a feature," Miller explained. "Smart Share. It suggests contacts based on frequency and proximity. It allows you to share a document with one tap at 10:42 in the morning, 2 minutes before you triggered the alarm. The file basic_packet_scan.pdf was shared via the app to an external email address." "Who?" I asked. "Vanessa?" Miller shook his head. "No, it went to an address hosted on a private server. Titan_logistics_group_88. "I do not know that name," I said. "Neither did we," Miller said. "Until we ran a background check on the domain registration. It is a shell company, small import-export firm operating out of a warehouse in Dayton." "Dayton," I repeated. "That is 30 minutes from Maple Glen." "Exactly," Miller said. "We looked into the owner of the LLC, a man named Carl Vance." The name hit me like a physical blow. Carl Vance. I knew him. Not well. But I knew him. He was Gordon's fishing buddy. He was the man who came over for barbecues. The man who sat on the back porch with Gordon, drinking cheap beer and talking in hushed tones about opportunities and margins. "Gordon knows him," I whispered. "We know," Miller said grimly. "We pulled Gordon's call logs from the months prior to the raid. He talks to Vance 3 times a day, and here's the kicker. Page. Vance is currently under investigation by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives for moving unregulated hazardous cargo across state lines to cut disposal costs." I felt sick. The world was spinning. Gordon told Derek to share it?" "We do not know if he told him," Miller said, "or if he just reached over and tapped the screen while Derek was bragging about the app. Derek's statement says Gordon was sitting right next to him. Gordon was the one who asked to see the logistics pages first." I remembered the scene. I remembered Gordon holding the paper up to the light. I used to manage schedules like this. He wasn't reminiscing. He was appraising. He was looking for a route. He was looking for a gap in the monitoring schedule so his friend could move illegal cargo without getting caught. "He used us," I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. "He did not just snoop. He was mining me for data." "It looks that way," Miller said. "Which changes this from a family dispute to Espionage Act territory. Intent to distribute defense information for financial gain." Miller threw his cigarette onto the wet pavement and crushed it with his heel. "We are bringing Gordon in for a second interview," Miller said. "A real one this time. No family lawyer. But I needed you to know. Your stepfather isn't just a nosy suburban dad. Paige, he is a predator, and he almost ate you alive." I stood there in the rain, letting the water soak into my blouse. I thought about my mother's phone call. Gordon leverages everything. She was right. He had leveraged her house. He had leveraged her son's stupidity. And he had tried to leverage my career to save a few $1,000s on a trucking shipment. The sadness I had felt for days evaporated. The guilt vanished. In their place, a cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. It was the same feeling I had when I locked onto a threat in the operations center. "Nail him," I said to Miller. Miller nodded. "We intend to." "And Miller?" I asked. "Yeah?" "Check the doorbell camera," I said. Gordon installed a Ring camera last year. If he told Vance he had the goods, he might have done it on the porch before the raid. He steps out there to smoke. Miller smiled. A shark-like grin. Way ahead of you. Jackson, we are pulling the footage now. I walked back into the building. I had a lot of work to do in the basement. And for the first time in a week, I was ready to do it. My family had declared war on me, thinking I was weak, but they forgot one thing. I analyzed threats for a living, and I had just identified the primary target. The investigation room had changed, in the first 48 hours. The atmosphere was one of exasperated correction, like a principal's office where the adults were trying to figure out which child broke the window. Now, the air was different. It was heavier. It smelled of stale coffee and the ozone hum of server fans running at maximum capacity. We were no longer talking about a domestic accident. We were tracing an infection line that had gone septic. Agent Miller sat across from me. He looked like he had not slept in 2 days. His eyes were red, and his shirt was wrinkled. But his mind was terrifyingly sharp. On the screen behind him was a network graph. It looked like a spider web made of neon light. At the center was my mother's house. Radiating out from it were lines connecting to cell towers, cloud servers, and finally, a dark node labeled simply Target 88. You need to see this, Miller said, his voice devoid of the sarcasm he had used earlier. We finished the packet trace. The PDF Derek created did not just sit in the cloud. It pinged a secondary server in pending status. I leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. What is the secondary server? It is a bounce point, Miller explained. It is a digital Dropbox used by a network we have been watching for 6 months. They specialize in moving unmanifested cargo, not drugs, not weapons, dual-use industrial components, things that look like farm equipment but can be used to enrich uranium if you have the right centrifuge. My stomach turned over. This was not just about a train full of chlorine. This was about the infrastructure of proliferation. The file Derek scanned contained the blind spots in the rail sensor grid. I whispered, if you know where the sensors are down for maintenance, you can move anything you want through the corridor without leaving a digital footprint. Exactly, Miller said, and that file found its way to them in less than 3 minutes. The door opened, and 2 junior agents brought Derek in. My brother looked terrible. He was wearing a gray sweatsuit provided by the holding facility. His designer stubble was now just patchy neglect. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I stayed seated. I could not be his sister right now. I had to be the analyst. Sit down. Mr. Jackson, Miller commanded. Derek sat. He did not ask for a lawyer this time. He looked too scared to speak. We need to talk about the app. Derek, Miller said, sliding a tablet across the table. We decompiled the code of the scanning tool you used. It is aggressive. It asks for permissions to access your contacts, your email history, and your calendar to make smart suggestions for file sharing. I just clicked Allow All. Derek mumbled, Everyone does. I just wanted it to work fast. Miller nodded. We know. And because you gave it access to your professional email, the one you use for your ad agency, it scanned your recent interactions to populate the Quick Share menu. Miller tapped the screen. A list of email addresses appeared. When the scan finished, the app popped up a dialog box. Miller continued. It said, Share with recent contacts, and offered 3 bubbles. You tapped the first one. I thought it was you. Page? Derek stammered. It had a P icon. It was not a P. Miller corrected him. It was a corporate logo, a blue pyramid. Derek squinted at the screen. He went pale. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet chalk. Titan Logistics, Derek whispered. I felt a chill go down my spine. Titan Logistics, the shell company Miller had identified earlier. The company owned by Carl Vance. Why is Titan Logistics in your recent contacts? Derek, I asked. My voice was sharp, cutting through his confusion. Derek looked at me, then at Miller. Gordon asked me to send them a proposal. Last week, he said his friend Carl needed a new logo and a website. He told me to email the pitch deck to that address. So you had an open email thread with the target, Miller summarized. And the algorithm did exactly what it was designed to do. It suggested the most relevant recent business contact. You tapped the screen without looking, didn't you? Derek put his head in his hands. It was just a reflex. I saw the blue icon. I just wanted to save the file. You did not save it. Mr. Jackson, Miller said coldly. You delivered it. You sent a classified federal document directly to the inbox of a money laundering front. Derek began to cry again. But this time, it was not the tantrum of a man-child. It was the terrified sobbing of someone who realizes he has unwittingly become an accessory to treason. I looked at the mirror on the wall. I knew Vanessa was behind it. They had brought her in to watch. They wanted her to see that her legal threats were meaningless against the weight of what was actually happening. Miller signaled the agents to take Derek away. As the door closed, I imagined Vanessa standing in the observation room for the first time in her life. She was silent. She was realizing that this was not a scandal she could spin. This was not something she could settle out of court. This was the kind of mistake that makes people disappear from their normal lives and reappear in federal prison databases. I turned back to Miller. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, investigative clarity. You asked me if I believed Gordon did this on purpose. I said. Miller nodded. We need to know. Paige, is he just a hustler who got lucky, or is he a player? I thought about Gordon. I thought about the man who sat in the recliner watching news channels, complaining about the government, acting like a buffoon. I thought about the tea stain. The tea stain was a distraction. I said slowly. My brain was starting to assemble the pieces. Not as a daughter, but as a threat analyst, I was building a profile. What do you mean? Miller asked. My mother spilled the tea. I said, she is clumsy, but Gordon placed the mug there. He put it right over the top secret header. Miller raised an eyebrow. To hide the marking? To give them an alibi. I said, if they got caught, they could say they couldn't read the classification. It was plausible deniability. It was structured. Miller leaned back in his chair. That is a sophisticated move for a retired security guard. He is not just a guard. I said, he worked logistics for 20 years. He knows how manifests work. He knows that a route is only as valuable as its loopholes. Miller pulled out a notebook. Let's go back to the entry. The door. The lock was bypassed. I said, but not broken. Miller corrected. We checked the strike plate again. It was loose. The screws had been backed out slightly. It gave way with a push because it was already compromised. I stared at him. Who loosened the screws? You tell me, Miller said. Who does the maintenance in that house? Gordon, I said. Miller flipped a page. And the spare key, the one your mother used to get into the hallway. Where was it kept? In a fake rock in the planter? I said. Did you know it was there? Miller asked. No, I said. I have not lived there in 10 years. I still have my old key on my ring. I didn't know they had a hide-a-key. So your mother knew where it was. Miller said, but you, the person guarding the classified material, did not know that the perimeter had a secondary access point. I felt a flash of memory. 3 years ago, I had come home for Christmas. I remembered walking into the kitchen and seeing Gordon with a screwdriver, tightening the hinges on the cabinets. He had smiled at me, just keeping things shipshape. Paige, you cannot let a house fall apart. He had reorganized the garage that year. He had moved the tool chest. He had labeled everything. Gordon likes to control the environment. I said, my voice barely a whisper. He moved the key. He showed Mom where it was. He made sure she felt empowered to use it. He weaponized her curiosity. Miller said, he knew she would not respect your privacy. He knew that if he wound her up enough about your secrets, she would eventually breach the room. He just had to wait. I felt sick. It was a long con. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a setup. Gordon had spent years chipping away at my credibility, making my family resent my silence, turning my job into a joke, all while positioning himself to be the one who could pick up the pieces when the walls finally came down. He asked questions. I said, remembering the dinner conversations. He always asked about the boring stuff. He never asked about terrorists or bombs. He asked about shipping lanes. He asked about weather delays. He asked if we monitored private rail spurs. I told myself he was just trying to relate to me. I continued, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. I thought he was just a bored old man trying to sound smart. But he was fishing. He was conducting a human intelligence operation at the dinner table. Miller nodded. He was building a map. And when you brought the basic packet home, the holy grail of logistical data, he knew exactly what it was. He didn't need to scan it himself. He just needed to get Derek to do it, because if Derek did it... I said, it looks like an accident. It looks like family drama. And Gordon stays clean. Miller finished. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was undeniable. But we need the nail. Miller said, we have the pattern. We have the motive. He is in debt up to his eyeballs, and Vance likely offered him a payout that would clear his mortgage. But we need the overt act. We need to prove he knew what he was doing before the police arrived. Miller reached for his laptop. He opened a media player. We scrubbed the Ring camera footage. Miller said, Gordon deleted the clips from the cloud account 10 minutes before we breached the door. He thought that was enough. I looked at the screen. You recovered it? Flash memory is resilient, Miller said, and Gordon is not a computer scientist. He just hit delete in the app. The raw data was still cached on the device's local storage chip. He pressed play. The video was grainy, shot from the wide-angle lens of a doorbell camera. It showed the front porch of my mother's house. The timestamp was 11:08 in the morning. 2 minutes before I pressed the panic button, Gordon walked into the frame. He was holding a cigarette, but he wasn't lighting it. He was holding a phone to his ear, not his main phone, a burner, a cheap flip phone that I had never seen before. He looked nervous. He paced back and forth, looking out at the street. Then he spoke. The audio was crisp, captured by the high-gain microphone designed to let you talk to delivery drivers. Yeah, I have it, Gordon said. His voice was low, hurried. The boy just digitized it. It is clear. I saw the bridge schedules. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. No, she does not suspect, Gordon said, letting out a short, harsh laugh. She is too busy lecturing everyone. They are all fighting inside. It is perfect chaos. He took a drag of the unlit cigarette, his hand shaking slightly. I sent the signal to your guy, Gordon continued. But listen to me. Carl, we had a deal. 50% upon delivery. I want the wire to hit the offshore account by noon. Do not screw me on this. He paused again. I do not care if it is hot. Gordon snarled into the phone. I have what you need, but it has a price. You want to move that shipment past the sensors tonight? You pay me, or I tell the girl to call it in. The video ended. The silence in the interrogation room was absolute. I stared at the black screen. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the feeling of a tumor being cut out. The pain was there, but so was the knowledge that the sickness was finally gone. He wasn't my father. He wasn't even a misguided stepfather. He was a hostile actor who had embedded himself in my family's operating system. He was willing to sell me out, I said softly. He was willing to let me go to prison. He was willing to let Derek be charged with a felony, all for 50% of a smuggling fee. Miller closed the laptop. That is conspiracy to commit espionage. Miller said, that is 20 years to life. I looked up at Miller. When do we pick him up? I asked. We do not, Miller said, standing up and checking his weapon. We already have him. He is in interview room B. He thinks he is there to complain about his phone. Miller walked to the door and held it open for me. Come on, Agent Jackson, Miller said. I think you should be the one to show him the video. I stood up. I straightened my blazer. I wiped the last trace of the daughter I used to be from my face. Let's go, I said. I walked down the hallway toward interview room B. My steps were steady. My hands were not shaking. I was not Paige from Maple Glen anymore. I was the storm that Gordon had summoned, and I was about to make landfall. The transition from a federal investigation to a federal prosecution is not a sudden cliff. It is a slow, grinding descent into a world of paperwork, plea bargains, and billable hours. The adrenaline of the raid had evaporated, leaving behind the sterile, fluorescent reality of legal accountability. The week following the discovery of Gordon's betrayal was a blur of meetings in conference rooms that smelled of floor wax and stale negotiation. My family's lawyer, Arthur Sterling, had stopped giving interviews to the local press the moment the United States Attorney's Office slapped the indictment regarding the Titan Logistics connection on the table. Sterling's bravado collapsed like a wet cardboard box. He realized he was not fighting a privacy case. He was fighting an espionage conspiracy case. We sat in a negotiation room at the Federal Building in Columbus. The table was long and mahogany. On one side sat the Assistant U.S. Attorney, a woman named Perkins, who looked like she wrestled sharks for cardio. On the other side sat my mother and Derek, looking smaller and grayer than I had ever seen them. I sat at a separate table, flanked by my own union-appointed counsel. I was no longer their family member in this room. I was a cooperating witness and a subject of internal discipline. "Let us be clear about the separation of cases," Perkins said, opening a file that was 3 inches thick. "The United States is severing the case against Gordon Miller. He is being charged under the Espionage Act with intent to distribute national defense information. That is a separate track. We are here to discuss the disposition of Lorraine Jackson and Derek Jackson." My mother flinched at the sound of her husband's name. Since the revelation of the doorbell footage, the video where Gordon sold us out for a wire transfer, she had stopped speaking his name entirely. She referred to him only as he, or that man. "My clients were manipulated," Sterling argued, though his voice lacked its usual theatrical boom. "They were unwitting pawns in a scheme orchestrated by a third party. They had no intent to harm the United States." "Intent is not required for a charge of gross negligence under Title 18, Perkins shot back, not even looking up from her notes. "Mrs. Jackson provided the physical access. Mr. Jackson provided the digital mechanism for dissemination. The fact that they were tricked mitigates the sentencing, but it does not erase the crime. The data left the secure environment. That is the statute." The deal was brutal in its simplicity. For Derek, the government offered a deferred prosecution agreement, but the terms were ruinous. He had to plead guilty to a misdemeanor count of mishandling government property. He would avoid prison time, provided he completed 3 years of probation, but the financial and professional cost was absolute. He had to surrender all electronic devices used in the commission of the act, his phone, his laptop, his backup drives, for permanent destruction. He had to pay a fine of $15,000, but the real killer was the disclosure clause. Because Mr. Jackson used his professional email and cloud accounts to facilitate the transfer, Perkins explained. He is required by federal data privacy laws to notify all clients whose data may have been commingled on those servers during the forensic scrub. He must inform every client his agency has worked with in the last 12 months that their proprietary data was part of a federal seizure. Derek put his head on the table. He knew what that meant. In the advertising world, trust is the only currency. Sending a letter to Nike or Coca-Cola saying, "The FBI has your marketing strategy because I scanned a classified document," is a death sentence. His agency, the boutique firm he had spent 6 years building, was dead. It died not with a bang, but with a compliance notification. "And Mrs. Jackson?" Sterling asked weakly. "Mrs. Jackson facilitated the breach by maintaining an insecure perimeter and ignoring verbal warnings from a federal officer," Perkins said, looking at my mother. "However, given her age and the clear manipulation by her husband, we are willing to suspend the criminal charges." Lorraine let out a sob of relief. "Conditional," Perkins continued, raising a finger, "on the payment of a civil penalty of $25,000 for the cost of the emergency response and forensic analysis. Furthermore, she must attend a mandatory 40-hour course on civilian information security protocols. and she remains on a federal watch list for 5 years. Any travel outside the country requires prior notification to the State Department. $25,000. That was half of my mother's retirement savings. She looked at me, her eyes wet and pleading, waiting for me to jump in, to say I would pay it, to say I would fix it. I stayed silent. I had my own price to pay. My disciplinary hearing took place 2 days later at the Sentinel headquarters. It was less dramatic, but equally painful. I stood before a panel of 3 senior directors. There were no lawyers here, just my peers. Judging my competence, the verdict was delivered by Director Holloway. "Agent Jackson," he said, reading from a printed sheet. "The board finds that while your reaction to the breach was immediate and likely prevented a catastrophic exploitation of the data, your initial failure to secure the basic packet in the travel safe constitutes a violation of Level 4 storage protocols." He looked over his reading glasses at me. "You are hereby issued a formal letter of reprimand. This will remain in your permanent personnel file for 60 months. Your security clearance is downgraded from top secret to secret. You are suspended from field operations for 180 days. You will continue your duties in the archive division until your probationary period is assessed." "I understand," I said. It was a career killer. I would never lead a team again. I would never run a field op. I was now a desk jockey, a librarian of threats rather than a hunter of them. But I wasn't fired, and I wasn't in handcuffs. "However," Holloway added, closing the folder, "the board notes that the timeline you provided allowed us to intercept the Titan Logistics transfer before the buyer could act. You made a mistake, Paige, but you also stopped a war. Do not forget that." I nodded, took the letter, and walked out. The fallout in the real world was messier. The legal system is clean, society is not. Vanessa, who had spent the first few days threatening lawsuits and posting vague, victim-blaming statuses on Facebook, suddenly went dark. Her lawyer, a real corporate attorney, not a strip mall hack, had evidently explained to her that her social media posts could be subpoenaed as evidence of the family's mindset. She deleted her Twitter, she scrubbed her Instagram. The sister who lived for likes vanished into a digital silence that must have felt like suffocation to her. She sent me one text message a week after the hearing. "You won. Are you happy?" I didn't reply. It wasn't about winning, it was about survival. Lorraine took the hardest hit socially, in Maple Glen. News travels faster than light. The sight of black SUVs on the lawn was enough to start the rumors. But the truth, that her husband was selling state secrets and she had helped him, was too juicy to ignore. She was removed from the library planning committee. Her bridge club suspended her membership. She called me once, drunk on sherry, crying about how Mrs. Gable looked at her in the grocery store. "They look at me like I am a traitor." "Paige," she slurred, "I have lived here for 30 years. Now I am the woman who married the spy." "You are not a traitor, Mom," I said, sitting in my empty apartment. "You were just careless, and carelessness has a cost." "I hate you," she whispered, and then hung up. Derek's fall was more tangible. He lost his office lease. His partners sued him for breach of fiduciary duty. He had to move back in with Lorraine, into the house with the broken door frame, because he couldn't afford his rent. The scanner guy, the tech-savvy creative director, was now working shifts at a local warehouse, moving boxes that didn't require an internet connection. And Gordon? Gordon was gone. He was being held in a federal detention center in Virginia, awaiting trial. The government was not offering him a deal. They wanted to make an example of him. The man who wanted to be a player in the big leagues had finally gotten his wish. He was now a very important person to the Department of Justice. I moved out of my apartment in D.C. It had too many windows. I found a new place in Arlington, a high-security complex typically used by diplomats and contractors. It was a fortress. Keycard access to the lobby, biometric access to the elevator, steel core doors. I spent my nights unpacking boxes in silence. I didn't visit home. I didn't go to birthday parties. I was an island. I had cut the anchor chain, and while I was drifting, I was also safe. No one could open my door. No one could scan my papers. No one could spill tea on my life. 3 weeks after the settlement, on a rainy Tuesday, I was sitting at my terminal in the basement archives. My job was monotonous now, categorizing old threat assessments from the early 2000s. It was data entry, the very thing my family had mocked me for. A notification pinged on my screen. It was an internal email. Priority, high, sender, classified. I opened it. It was not a reprimand. It was not a tasking order. It was a single line of text, followed by a redacted image. Subject: Operation Iron Horse / Outcome Assessment text. Signal interception confirmed based on provided source data. Shipment seized at Port of Baltimore. 3 containment units of precursor agents recovered. Payload neutralized. I stared at the screen. The shipment. The cargo that Gordon's friend, Vance, was trying to move. It wasn't just industrial waste. Precursor agents is agency speak for chemical weapon components. If that train had moved, if the sensors had been bypassed, that cargo would have reached a buyer who wasn't planning to clean swimming pools. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of the server room was the only sound. I had lost my family. I had tanked my career. My mother hated me. My brother was ruined. My stepfather was facing 20 years in a cage. I would eat dinner alone tonight, and tomorrow night, and probably for the rest of my life. I looked at the words, payload neutralized. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. It tasted bitter, but it went down smooth. Worth it, I whispered to the empty room. I closed the email, deleted it from the server as protocol dictated, and went back to work. The spreadsheets were boring, yes, but they were the only things that made sense in a world that had lost its mind. The holidays in America are designed to test the structural integrity of the family unit. They are stress tests disguised as celebrations. Thanksgiving is the warm-up, Christmas is the main event, and New Year's Eve is the recovery period. For 34 years, I had participated in this annual migration. Driving back to Ohio to eat dry turkey and listen to Gordon complain about the price of gas. This year, the calendar turned to November, and my phone remained silent. There were no group texts about who was bringing the pie. There were no passive-aggressive reminders from my mother to book my flight early. There was just a silence so profound it felt like I was living in a soundproof booth. I stayed in Arlington for Thanksgiving. I ordered Chinese takeout from a place that had a bulletproof partition at the counter. I ate it sitting on my floor, watching a documentary about deep-sea welding. It was peaceful. It was also incredibly lonely. The silence of my family was not just an absence of noise. It was a weapon. It was a tactical embargo. They were freezing me out, hoping that the cold would make me crack, make me call them and apologize for saving the country from a chemical attack. 3 days before Christmas, the first breach in the embargo arrived. It came in the form of a physical letter. My mother, Lorraine, did not trust email anymore. A wise choice, given that her last digital interaction had cost her $25,000. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy stock. It looked like a wedding invitation. Inside was a card with a picture of a snowy cottage on the front. I sat at my kitchen island and read it. Paige, I hope you are happy in your fortress. The house is very quiet this year. We are not putting up a tree. Gordon is not here to string the lights, and Derek says he does not have the heart for it. I still wake up at night thinking about the door. Not the broken lock, but the fact that you closed it on us. I raised you to be open. Paige, I raised you to share. I do not know where you learned to be so hard. Maybe it is that job. Maybe they trained the daughter out of you. Mrs. Higgins asked about you yesterday. I told her you were busy with important federal work. That is what you wanted, isn't it? To be important. Well, you are important now. You are the most important person in the prosecution's file. I am sending you your old ornaments. I do not want them on my tree if you are not here to hang them. Maybe you can hang them on a government-issued plant. Mom, I put the card down. It was a masterclass in guilt. She still didn't get it. She still framed it as a personality flaw on my part, as if my refusal to let them sell state secrets was just me being hard. She didn't mention the tea stain. She didn't mention the Titan Logistics email. She just mentioned the tree. I laughed. A short, dry sound in the empty apartment. Government-issued plant. That was actually funny. Lorraine had a sharp tongue when she wanted to. The next day, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. It was not a paragraph. It was not a legal threat. It was 5 words. Congratulations. You won. Family destroyed. I stared at the screen. Vanessa, the lawyer. Vanessa, who saw everything as a case to be won or lost. To her, this wasn't a tragedy. It was a scoreboard. And in her mind, I had run up the score by putting Gordon in jail and Derek on probation. She didn't see the chemical weapons. She only saw the empty chair at the head of the table. I didn't reply. What could I say? You are welcome? I did not destroy the family. Gordon did? It didn't matter. In the court of Vanessa Jackson, I was guilty of the crime of being right. Then came the message from Derek. It arrived at 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve. I was awake, reading a technical manual on encryption protocols because I couldn't sleep. Paige, I am drunk. I shouldn't be texting you. My probation officer checks this phone. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear. He was typing, deleting, retyping. I am so mad at you. I lost everything. My agency is gone. I am working at a fulfillment center packing boxes. I have a master's degree in marketing and I am scanning barcodes for $12 an hour. But I had to take the class. The security class Mom has to take? I took it early. They showed us a video about data aggregation, about how little pieces of info make a map. I saw the example. It wasn't our case, but it was close. A guy posted a selfie at a power plant, and 6 months later the grid went down. I did not know. Paige, I swear to God, I thought you were just being a bitch. I didn't know the app was mining the data. I didn't know Gordon was doing what he did. I am still mad, but I think I'm scared now. Scared that I was the guy who almost broke the world. Don't text me back. I just needed to say it. I put the phone down. My hands were shaking. I didn't know. That was the epitaph of the Jackson family. They didn't know. They didn't want to know. They wanted the world to be simple, a place where doors were unlocked, where papers were just papers, where Uncle Gordon was just a harmless old man who liked fishing. I had shattered that illusion, and they hated me for it. Not because I was wrong, but because I had turned on the lights at a party that was already over. I spent the first few weeks of January reconstructing the past. I wasn't doing it for the case. The FBI had that covered. But for myself, I needed to understand how I had missed it. I sat with a notepad and started listing memories of Gordon. The time he lost his job at the trucking company. He said it was layoffs. Now, I wondered if he had been fired for skimming, the gambling debts. Mom always whispered about them. Gordon had a bad run at the track. Gordon's stocks took a hit. It was always bad luck, never bad judgment. And then, the questions. So, Paige, these sensors, do they work in the rain? Does the government track private rail lines, or just the main ones? If a train stops for maintenance, does the GPS keep pinging? I had answered him, vaguely. Yes, I had given non-committal answers like, it depends on the system, or usually, yes. But to a man like Gordon, a man building a puzzle, even a maybe was a piece that fit. I had been the leak, not by giving him documents, but by letting him sit at my table and breathe my air. I had normalized the conversation of security until he felt comfortable enough to steal it. I was the shortcut, I whispered to myself. He didn't have to hack a server. He just had to marry my mother and wait for me to come home for a birthday. Work became my refuge. The basement archive was quiet, and the data didn't judge me. I processed threat assessments with a speed and accuracy that bordered on robotic. In mid-January, I was summoned to Director Holloway's office again. I walked in expecting another lecture, another probationary check-in. Instead, Holloway was standing by the window, looking out at the gray D.C. skyline. "Sit down, Jackson," he said. I sat. "The review board has finished its quarterly assessment," Holloway said. turning to face me. Your work in the archives has been exemplary. You have flagged 3 historical anomalies that previous analysts missed. You have a knack for seeing the pattern in the noise. Thank you, sir, I said. We are moving you, he said. Out of the basement. My head snapped up. Sir? We are forming a new unit, Holloway said. Internal threat mitigation. It is a team dedicated to analyzing compromised assets, people who have been burned, people who need to understand how their personal lives became vulnerabilities. He looked at me. We need someone who understands the mechanics of betrayal, someone who knows that the threat isn't always a guy in a ski mask. Sometimes it is the person passing the gravy. I felt a strange, bitter laugh bubble up in my chest. They were promoting me. They were taking my trauma, packaging it, and giving it a budget code. You want me to teach agents how not to trust their families? I asked. I want you to teach them how to protect them, Holloway corrected, by keeping the door locked, even when it hurts. I accept, I said. Good. You start Monday. Clearance restored to top secret. Probationary status. I walked out of the office. I should have been happy. I had clawed my way back. I was a senior analyst again. I had a team. I had a future. But as I walked to the elevator, I realized I had no one to call. I couldn't call Mom. I couldn't call Derek. Vanessa would just mock me. I was successful. I was respected. And I was completely, utterly alone. That night, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. This is Paige Jackson, I answered, my voice automatic. Ms. Jackson, this is Agent Miller, the familiar voice said. Sorry to call you on your personal line. It is fine, Miller, I said. What is it? Did Gordon take a plea? No, Miller said. That is the thing. Gordon is not taking a plea. He is going to trial. He claims he was framed. He claims he never made the call. We have the video, I said, confused. We have the audio. We do, Miller said. But his defense is arguing that the context is missing. They are going to drag everyone onto the stand. Paige, you, your mother, Derek. They are going to try to paint this as a family conspiracy to frame the stepfather for the son's mistake. That is insane, I said. It is desperate, Miller agreed. But here's the kicker. We found something else, on Gordon's burner phone, the one he used in the video. What? There was a draft message, Miller said. Written but never sent. It was time-stamped 3 months ago. It was addressed to an anonymous tip line at the agency. I frowned. He was going to tip off the agency? About what? About you, Miller said. The silence on the line was heavy. The draft said, My stepdaughter, Paige Jackson, is bringing classified files home. I am worried she is selling them. You should investigate. The room spun. He was going to report me? I whispered. He was setting up a contingency, Miller said. If he got caught, or if the deal went south, he was going to burn you first. He was going to claim he was a whistleblower. He was going to say he only accessed the files to prove you were reckless. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just greed. It was malice. He had a plan to destroy me from the beginning. He was going to use my career as his get-out-of-jail-free card. We need you at the hearing next week, Miller said gently. We need you to testify to the protocols. But mostly, we need you to hear this in open court. We need the jury to see your face when we read that draft. I will be there, I said. My voice was ice. Paige, Miller said, pausing. I know this is hard, but you were right. About everything. I know, I said. That is the problem. I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. I thought about Gordon's smile. I thought about the way he used to say, I am just the stepdad. I do not know anything. He knew everything. He knew exactly what he was doing. I stood up and walked to the window. The lights of Arlington twinkled below me. The knot in my stomach, the guilt, the doubt, the lingering question of, did I overreact, finally unraveled. It was gone. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the bad daughter. I was the target. And next week, in a federal courtroom. I was going to be the bullet that ended him. The federal courthouse in Columbus was a monolith of limestone and glass, designed to make you feel small before you even walked through the metal detectors. Inside, the air was recycled and cold, smelling of floor wax and stale anxiety. I walked down the marble hallway, my heels clicking a steady rhythm that echoed off the high ceilings. I was alone. There were no family members flanking me, no supportive hand on my shoulder. I was just witness number one for the prosecution. When I entered the courtroom, the tableau was already set. It looked like a wedding where the bride and groom hated each other, separated by the aisle of the law. On the left side sat the remnants of the Jackson family. My mother, Lorraine, was sitting in the second row. She looked 10 years older than she had a month ago. Her hair, usually dyed a vibrant chestnut, was showing gray roots, and she was staring at her hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Derek sat 2 seats away from her, slumped over, wearing a cheap suit that fit him poorly. He did not look up when I entered. Vanessa was in the back row, wearing dark sunglasses indoors, trying to be invisible. On the right side sat Gordon. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit because the charges involved national security and flight risk. He had been denied bail. He looked thinner. The jovial, pot-bellied Uncle Gordon mask had melted away, leaving behind a sharp, predatory face that watched me with the intensity of a trapped animal. I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table. I did not look at my family. I focused on the Great Seal of the United States hanging behind the judge's bench. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Hannon walked in. He was a man with a face like a crumpled road map and eyes that had seen every variation of human deceit. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the defense table. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice gravelly, "call your next witness." Gordon's lawyer stood up. He was not the strip mall lawyer Vanessa had hired initially. He was a court-appointed federal defender, a tired man named Mr. Clark who knew he was fighting a losing battle but had to go through the motions. The defense calls Paige Jackson to the stand. I stood up. I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. "Ms. Jackson," Mr. Clark began, leaning against the podium. "You are the one who brought the classified materials into the home, correct?" "Yes," I said. "And you are the one who left them unsecured, correct?" "Yes." Mr. Clark nodded, pacing slightly. "Now, my client, your stepfather, claims he was merely concerned about the nature of your work. He claims he looked at those papers because he was worried you were involved in something dangerous. Is it not true that he has often expressed interest in your safety?" He asked questions. I said, keeping my voice flat. "Exactly," Clark said. "Questions of a concerned parent. And when he saw those documents about dangerous chemicals moving through your town, is it not possible that his reaction was one of panic? That his call to his friend Mr. Vance was simply a man seeking advice on how to handle a potential threat? It was a weak narrative, but it was all they had. The concerned dad defense. I looked at Clark. I did not blink. "No," I said. "That is not possible." "Why not?" Clark challenged. "Because," I said, leaning into the microphone, "you do not ask for a 50% cut of the profits when you are asking for advice." "Objection," Clark shouted. "Speculation. Sustained." The judge muttered. "Just answer the questions." "Ms. Jackson." Clark wrapped up his cross-examination quickly. Sensing that I was not going to break, he sat down, looking defeated. Then, the assistant U.S. attorney, Ms. Perkins, stood up. She was holding a remote control. "Ms. Jackson," Perkins said, "I want to direct your attention to Exhibit 4A. This is the audio recovered from the Ring doorbell camera at the residence on the morning of the incident." She pointed the remote at the large screen on the wall. "Please listen carefully." The courtroom went silent. The audio hissed with the sound of wind hitting a microphone. Then, Gordon's voice filled the room. It was clear, sharp, and utterly devoid of the bumbling charm he used at family dinners. "Yeah, I have it. The boy just digitized it. It is clear. I saw the bridge schedules. I heard a gasp from the gallery. It was my mother. She had heard the description of the video, but she had never heard the voice. The audio continued. No, she does not suspect. She is too busy lecturing everyone. It is perfect chaos. Derek lifted his head from his hands. He looked at the back of Gordon's head with a mixture of confusion and pure hatred. I sent the signal to your guy. But listen to me. Carl, we had a deal. 50% upon delivery. Perkins paused the recording. Ms. Jackson? Perkins asked. Whose voice is that? That is Gordon Miller. I said, and who is the boy he refers to? That is my brother, Derek Jackson. Did Derek know he was digitizing the file for a smuggling operation? No, I said firmly. He was manipulated. Perkins nodded. She walked over to the defense table and picked up a piece of paper. One more thing. Ms. Jackson, during our forensic analysis of the defendant's burner phone, we found a draft text message. It was written 3 months ago but never sent. I would like you to read it for the court. She handed me the paper. I looked at the text. I had heard about it from Miller, but seeing it in black and white was different. It was visceral. Please read the highlighted section. Perkins said. I took a breath. My voice did not shake. My stepdaughter, Paige Jackson, is bringing classified files home. I read, I am worried she is selling them. You should investigate. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. Perkins turned to the jury. He was not a concerned father. Ladies and gentlemen, he was a man setting up a safety net. He was prepared to frame his own stepdaughter for espionage to cover his tracks if his deal went south. He was willing to send her to prison to save himself. I looked at my mother. Lorraine was not crying anymore. She was staring at Gordon with a look of absolute horror. It was the look of a woman who realizes that the person sleeping next to her for 10 years was a monster wearing a human mask. She realized that every argument we had, every time she took his side against me, every time she told me I was being difficult, she had been handing him the ammunition to destroy us. Derek was shaking. He finally understood. He wasn't just the scanner guy, he was the patsy. Gordon had used his son's eagerness to please, his desire to show off his tech skills, as a free photocopier for treason. Gordon did not look back at them. He stared straight ahead. His jaw clenched. He knew the game was over. The concerned dad act had just been decapitated by his own words. The prosecution rests. Perkins said. The judge looked at the defense table. Mr. Clark? Clark looked at Gordon, then at the jury. The defense rests, Your Honor. There was no closing argument that could fix this. The audio was a confession. The text message was a character assassination signed by the author. Judge Hannon looked at Gordon. Defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. Hannon said, banging his gavel. The evidence of flight risk and ongoing danger to the community is substantial. Marshal, take him. 2 U.S. Marshals moved in. They did not be gentle. They pulled Gordon out of his chair. He didn't fight. But he didn't walk willingly either. They cuffed his hands behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs echoed in the silent room. As they led him past the gallery, Gordon stopped for a split second. He looked at Lorraine. Lorraine, he started to say. My mother stood up. She was trembling, but her voice was surprisingly steady. Do not speak to me, she said. Do not ever speak my name again. The marshals shoved him forward, and he disappeared through the side door. The heavy wood slammed shut, sealing him away from the lives he had tried to leverage. The courtroom began to clear. I stood up and gathered my purse. I felt exhausted, hollowed out, as if my bones had been removed and replaced with lead pipes. I walked out into the hallway. I wanted to get to my car. I wanted to drive back to Arlington and lock my door. Paige, I stopped. I turned around. Vanessa was standing there. She had taken off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and puffy. The high-powered lawyer, the shark of the corporate world, looked broken. I waited. I didn't offer a greeting. Did you know? Vanessa asked. Her voice was a whisper. About the text? About him planning to frame you? I shook my head. No, I found out when the investigators found the phone. Vanessa let out a shaky breath. She looked at the floor, then back at me. We treated you like you were the enemy, she said. We thought you were just jealous or mean. We defended him. Paige. I paid for his initial consultation. I used my own money to hire a lawyer for the man who tried to send my sister to prison. You did not know. I said, that is the point. Vanessa, you never know. That is why we have protocols. That is why I have locks. Vanessa nodded slowly. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but she knew she had lost that right. The distance between us wasn't physical. It was a canyon carved by months of betrayal. Mom wants to talk to you, Vanessa said, gesturing toward the bench where Lorraine was sitting, staring at the wall. I looked at my mother. She looked frail. The denial that had sustained her, the belief that this was all a misunderstanding, was gone. She was facing the raw, ugly truth of her life. I walked over to her. Mom? I said softly. Lorraine looked up. Her eyes were empty. There was no anger left, just a vast, gray sadness. He sold us, she whispered. For 50%. Yes, I said. He sat at my table. She continued, her voice cracking. He ate my food, and he was planning to report you. He was going to let them take you away. I sat down next to her, leaving a foot of space between us. He is gone now. Mom, he cannot hurt us anymore. Lorraine looked at me. She looked at my suit, my badge clipped to my belt, the rigid posture I held. She reached out a hand, but stopped before touching me, letting it hover in the air. I chose him over you, she said. That is what happened. You told me to stop. You told me not to open the door. And I chose him because he made it sound so easy. And you made it sound so hard. Safety is hard. Mom, I said. She dropped her hand. Was it worth it? She asked. It was the question she had asked months ago, but the tone was different now. Before, it was an accusation. Now, it was a genuine inquiry. She wanted to know if the destruction of our family, the shame, the financial ruin, the loneliness, if it all balanced out against whatever invisible thing I had saved. I thought about the email I had received. Payload neutralized. I thought about the bridge. I thought about the thousands of people who were currently driving home from work, listening to the radio, complaining about traffic, completely unaware that a cloud of chlorine gas had almost turned their lungs to liquid. I looked at my mother. I looked at the tears tracking through her foundation. Yes, I said. She nodded, accepting the answer. She didn't understand it. Not fully, but she accepted it. She stood up. Vanessa helped her steady herself. Derek was waiting by the elevator, looking like a ghost. They were a family unit, damaged and limping, but still together. I was the outlier. Goodbye, Paige, Lorraine said. Goodbye, Mom. I said. I watched them get into the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off the view of my past. I walked out of the courthouse and into the gray Ohio afternoon. The air was cold and clean. I got into my rental car and drove. I didn't go to the house. I didn't drive past my high school. I drove straight to the highway and pointed the car east, toward D.C. It took 6 hours to get back to Arlington. By the time I arrived, it was dark. I keyed into the parking garage. I took the elevator to the 8th floor. I scanned my fob at the lobby door. I scanned my thumb at my apartment door. Click, whir, thud. The sound of the locks engaging behind me was the most comforting sound in the world. My apartment was quiet. It was sparse. There were no family photos on the mantel. There was no tree. There was just a clean desk, a comfortable chair, and a window overlooking the city lights. I walked over to the desk. I opened my bag and took out a small velvet box. Inside was a coin. It wasn't a medal. In my line of work, we don't get parades. We get challenge coins. This one was heavy, bronze, with the agency crest on one side and a single word on the back. Vigilance. I didn't put it on a shelf. I opened my travel safe, the heavy steel box that started all of this, and placed the coin inside. I locked the safe. I went to the window and looked out at the streams of headlights moving along the highway. They looked like blood cells moving through a vein, alive and flowing. I had no one to call. I had no Sunday dinner to attend. My brother hated me. My mother feared me. My sister resented me. But the traffic was moving. The trains were running. The city was breathing. I took a sip of water and leaned my forehead against the cold glass. "Worth it," I whispered. And for the first time in a year, I slept without dreaming of open doors. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden costs of duty and the complexity of family betrayal, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to Jane Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay safe, and remember, keep your doors locked.